Before meeting Alex, my life was pretty uneventful. I was focused on advancing my career, spending most of my time working on cutting-edge sustainable energy solutions. Social interactions were minimal, mainly revolving around work or the occasional get-together with a few close friends. My routine was steady, predictable, and mostly solitary. The change came when I decided to attend a college reunion, despite usually avoiding large social events. That AES where I met Alex, a vibrant and ambitious person who immediately caught my attention. We connected instantly, and our shared aspirations, despite our different approaches, brought us closer. Alex's enthusiasm and drive complemented my more reserved and thoughtful nature, creating a balanced partnership. By the time our story begins, Alex and I had been married for 6 years. I vividly recall our wedding ceremony surrounded by 300 guests, 7 bridesmaids and groomsmen, and an extravagant display of 20,000 worth of flowers. The officiant asked, "Do you, Alex Harper Morgan, take Taylor Jordan Miller to be your lawful spouse, forsaking all others until death do you part?" Alex's affirmative response, accompanied by a loving look, felt like a promise of fidelity. I made a similar commitment, gazing at Alex with the same sincerity. I have always believed Alex and I make a great team because we share similar life goals and interests, yet our differences keep our relationship dynamic. Alex's lifelong passion for competitive sports showcases a spirited nature, whereas I prefer a more relaxed approach, favoring cooperation over competition. Despite my athletic build, I've never pursued sports with the same fervor. Alex is also more outgoing, forming numerous casual friendships, while I enjoy social activities but prefer a few deep, meaningful connections, reflecting my upbringing in a well-mannered, affluent family. Alex received an excellent education from one of the top colleges in the Pacific Northwest and landed a job as a sales representative for a tech company. This high-paying job came not only because of Alex's education and intelligence, but also due to a charismatic presence. It seems the tech industry values engaging personalities to charm potential clients. With a height of 5'9", weighing 140 pounds, short dark hair, a captivating smile, and striking blue eyes, Alex was very successful. The role required frequent travel, keeping Alex away from our modern penthouse 3 nights a week, sometimes over weekends. This aspect of the job left me feeling lonely, craving companionship. In Alex's absence, I often found myself filling the time with movies, sports games, or bowling with male friends, though mostly I stayed home watching TV. My job doesn't require travel. In fact, I almost never have to leave our condo if I don't want to. I sell proprietary software and hardware online that optimizes renewable energy systems, integrating them seamlessly into the electrical grid. Having invented and patented these products, I manage everything from my high-tech home office, only needing to supervise equipment production in the suburbs for a few hours a week. Being home often during the day, I know most of the neighbors, which is unusual in many urban condo buildings where residents rarely interact. Other residents have tried to convince me to become the president of the condominium association, but I have managed to avoid that responsibility. However, I agreed to handle the association's accounting. Our condominium has 4 duplex apartments on each of the 2 floors and a single-level apartment on each floor. The duplex apartments have an office, 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, a large living room, and 3 large bathrooms. The single-level residences feature a small living room, kitchen, bathroom, powder room, 1 bedroom, and a small closet. The single-level unit, 5B, next to our unit, 5A, on the 5th floor, is rented by a young woman who looks too young to afford the rent in our luxury building. I'd guess she is about 23. Alex and I are only 29, so I think many people in the building have similar thoughts about us, especially since we own our apartment rather than rent. The young woman's name is Casey Walker. Most residents aren't home during weekdays, so they don't realize that Casey is often at home, frequently receiving 2 to 4 visitors a day, all men. Casey's appearance and the steady flow of male visitors. The constant flow of male visitors to Casey Walker's apartment led me to suspect that she might be involved in some kind of escort work. However, I didn't feel it was my place to pry into her business, especially since she kept to herself and didn't cause any issues. During the first year Casey lived in Unit 5B, I saw her around the pool or the gym a dozen times, but I never mentioned my suspicions. Firstly, it wasn't really my concern what she did for a living, and secondly, it's not exactly a topic for casual conversation. Curiously, during that first year, I rarely saw Casey wearing makeup. At the pool, she usually donned a conservative one-piece swimsuit, and at the gym, she wore oversized shorts and t-shirts. When passing through the hallway or walking to and from the lobby, she almost always dressed in pants and long-sleeve shirts. In public, she often wore her long, shiny brown hair in a bun and sported bulky black glasses, even though it seemed unlikely she needed them, as the lenses appeared to be plain glass. It was clear she tried to downplay her natural beauty when she was in tea with clients, but it was impossible to completely disguise her striking appearance. Casey had an almost flawless face, a well-proportioned figure that even conservative clothing couldn't fully conceal, incredibly long legs, and a sculpted silhouette. She stood nearly 5'8" tall, slim but not too thin. My interactions with Casey were friendly but not particularly close during that first year. We knew each other's first and last names, exchanged smiles, and greeted each other in passing. We had a few casual conversations during workouts or at the pool. Once, we even ran into each other at the local Whole Foods and spent a few minutes discussing the best ways to prepare and serve organic vegetables. Casey was a health enthusiast, not just about exercise, but also about food. Everything changed one Thursday around 1:00 p.m., a day when Alex was out of town and not due back until Friday evening. I was leaving our apartment to make one of my weekly visits to the equipment manufacturing plant when I heard screams coming from apartment 5B. This was highly unusual, especially since the apartments were well soundproofed. Concerned, I listened at the door and didn't like what I heard. It sounded like a man was hitting a woman. I knocked on the door, announcing myself as the building superintendent. There was a brief silence, and then I heard sobs. A deep male voice shouted through the door, "Screw off! We don't need anything!" I responded firmly, "Open the door, or I'll call the cops." The door opened to reveal a large man who yelled, "It's none of your damn business! Get lost!" As he continued to shout, I caught sight of Casey on the floor, looking injured with what appeared to be blood on her. I didn't let him finish his tirade. On my keychain, I had a cheap self-defense tool, a hard piece of plastic with a straight part featuring finger holes, 2 rounded ends extending beyond the hand when held, and a stub with an enlarged head between 2 fingers. The man was taller and heavier than me, even though I stand at 6'2" and have a solid build. Without hesitation, I struck him in the mouth with the enlarged head of the stub. He staggered back as I advanced, hitting him again and again. On the third strike, he tripped over Casey, hitting his head on the marble floor and falling unconscious. I helped Casey up, guiding her to a chair and closing the door. She had a black eye, a bleeding nose, and scratches on her arm and leg. She was wearing a nightgown, and despite my efforts to focus solely on helping her, I couldn't help but notice her stunning figure. "Are you okay?" I asked, realizing it was a foolish question. "Can I get you something?" "I am hurting," she moaned, taking a deep breath. "But I'll be fine. Could you get me some paper towels for my nose and a cold compress from the freezer?" I quickly complied, and while she applied the compress to her eye, I cleaned the blood from her nose. "Who is this jerk?" I asked, nodding towards the man lying on the floor. "An angry customer," she muttered. "We should call the police," I suggested, still concerned. But Casey quickly objected, not wanting the police involved, likely due to her line of work. After some discussion, it was clear she'd want to draw attention to herself. I finally relented. "I have an idea. He can think he can get away with this. Do you trust me to handle him?" "Yes, as long as it is not in my apartment," she muttered, wincing in pain. I quickly went to my apartment, grabbed some zip ties, a bottle of water, a bottle of whiskey, and some sleeping pills from Alex's stash of legal pharmaceuticals. When I returned, I tied the man's hands behind his back with the zip ties, rolled him onto his back, and splashed cold water on his face. As the man began to wake up, I helped him to his feet. He was too heavy to carry, so I took the keys out of his pocket and led him downstairs. I asked him to point out his car, sat him in the driver's seat, and convinced him that the pills I offered were painkillers to help him feel better. I gave him water to take the pills and kept talking, trying to convince him never to come to our building again. As the pills took effect and he drifted into unconsciousness, I poured a bit of whiskey into his mouth. Once he passed out, I cut the ties, pocketed them, started his car, and locked it. I then called emergency services to report a drunk man in a parked car. I didn't wait for the police and went back to check on Casey. Casey's door was still partially open, so I knocked and pushed it further open. "Casey, this is Taylor. Can I come in?" I heard her say, "Of course, come in." She was sitting on the couch wearing a sweatshirt and sweatpants over her nightgown, her head back with a compress on her nose and another on her eye. "Let me see," I said as I approached. I carefully removed her hand and the compress from her eye. It didn't look good. "You need to go to the emergency room," I insisted. She began to protest, but I interrupted. "Casey, this isn't optional. You need medical attention. Where are your shoes and purse?" She pointed them out. As I put her shoes on, I couldn't help but notice how perfect her legs were. We walked slowly downstairs, avoiding the police, who were dealing with the man in the parking lot. On the way to the hospital, I called my team to let them know I'd be late. At the hospital, I helped Casey check in, confirmed her insurance details, and handed her my business card with my cell number. "Call me when you're done. I'll pick you up," I told her. She tried to protest, saying I had done enough, but I insisted, "No, call me. You might need to pick up medication. I'll be there in 10 minutes. "Okay, thank you," she said, trying to smile. I patted her head and left. I was finishing work when my phone rang. "Hey, Taylor, it's Casey," she said, sounding stronger. "Are you ready to leave?" I asked. "Yes, but I can take a taxi if you are busy," she said. "I am not busy. I'll be there in 15 minutes. "Just wait in the ER, I replied. "Okay, thank you," she said quickly. When I picked her up, she had a bandage over her eye and cotton in her nose. We stopped at the pharmacy for pain pills and ointment, then I took her home. "How about I bring you dinner?" I suggested. She hesitated, but I insisted I'd like to. "How about chicken fingers and fresh vegetables?" "All organic," I added with a smile, recalling our conversation at Whole Foods. She laughed softly. "Sure, that sounds good," she said, handing me her key. "Just come in." I brought food, a bottle of wine, and seltzer at 6 p.m., using the key to enter. I finally noticed her apartment's decor minimal but tasteful with original paintings. Casey was at the kitchen table, looking much better. We chatted as we ate, and when I poured her wine, she said, "I can have wine with my painkillers." I paused, apologizing. "But I could use a couple of glasses." She grinned, and I poured more. "You're not going to take advantage of me, are you?" She joked. "Of course not," I chuckled. "But let's avoid passing out." "I'll try," she replied. As we finished dinner, she became serious. "You probably think I am awful for seeing all those men," she said, avoiding my eyes. Casey sipped from her glass of wine. "Of course not. How you earn your living is your business as long as it doesn't infringe on my rights," I answered sincerely. "How long ago did you realize that I work as an escort?" she asked, making eye contact with her one uncovered eye. "About a month after you moved in," I replied calmly, taking a sip of my wine. "Does your wife, Alex, know? Have you two talked about it?" she asked. "Never," I responded. "Alex isn't around much, as you have probably noticed, and it's not something that comes up in conversation. I don't gossip, and I certainly wouldn't speculate about a good neighbor." After some more conversation, where she seemed to be testing the waters and sharing more about herself, she said, "You're the only straight guy I've known since living here who hasn't hit on me. Why?" "Because I take my marriage vows seriously," I replied. "More than 90 of my clients are married," she countered. "But I am not one of them," I said. "Physically, you are the most attractive woman I've ever seen, but I don't know you well enough to know if I am compatible with you. I have never been interested in just a physical relationship. I need an emotional connection to have the kind of experience I want. So if you were offended that I didn't hit on you, don't to be." She didn't respond immediately, just looked at me with her good eye for a long moment. "You know, despite the number of clients and the physical nature of my business, I am lonely," I have almost no friends. My work and its hours preclude that, at least with the kind of people I want to connect with. We had a painfully direct conversation about her personal life, ending with me asking, "So, what is your ultimate goal in life, Casey?" "Ultimately, I want what you have. I want a spouse and eventually children. I want someone to be my one and only, for me to be faithful to him, and for him to be faithful to me. I am saving enough money to be financially independent by the time I am 30. Then I'll move away, leave this life behind, and try to find the right man. But my plans are on hold for now because I can work until my eye, nose, and these scratches heal." An idea suddenly struck me. "How would you feel about working for me?" I began, but she immediately looked alarmed. "What? I thought you were different," she said, her voice high-pitched with tension. "Let me finish," I laughed, realizing it wasn't appropriate. "I'm not trying to hire you for that. I need help with paperwork. I am hopelessly behind and keep putting it off. This is something even someone with one eye can do," I joked, trying to lighten the mood. She giggled at my joke. "$700 an hour, $2,500 for a full night, $44,000 a day on site plus expenses," she muttered, then caught herself, blushing and putting a hand to her mouth. "I can pay $700 an hour, but I can offer $25 an hour and free meals now and then until you are healed." She giggled. "On Monday, show me what you need done and I'll let you know," she said. After another 20 minutes of small talk, it was clear she was exhausted. I gathered my things and she hugged me, whispering, "Thank you so much," in my ear. I kept a respectful distance, though I was somewhat embarrassed by my own reaction. I patted her on the head and left, finding it a pleasant evening with a friend, free of any real sexual connotations. I liked her as a person and hadn't realized how lonely she might be. The next morning, while I was working, there was a knock on my door. "Hi, Taylor," Casey greeted me with a smile, dressed conservatively as usual. "Hello, Casey. Are you feeling better today?" I asked cheerfully. "It still hurts like hell, but I am in a better mood," she chuckled. "You probably want your key back," I began, reaching for the key on the table in the foyer. "No, keep it. In case I need rescuing again, and you can reach me at the door," she said. "I am here because I need help with groceries. The doctor forbade me from driving with my eye covered and on pain pills. Can you take me today?" "Of course," I smiled broadly. "How about in an hour?" "1:30 is perfect," she giggled, clapping her hands. "Just knock on my door when you are ready." Casey and I had a great time grocery shopping. It was the first time I'd ever found grocery shopping enjoyable. Usually it is just a chore, but Casey made it fun, especially with her humorous habit of talking to the vegetables as if they were people. The following Monday, Casey came to my apartment shortly after Alex had left for work. I showed her how to fill out the various forms and paperwork scattered around my office and living room. She was meticulous, if not fast, prioritizing accuracy over speed, which was fine for a first-time effort. We had lunch together, worked some more, and then I took her to the pharmacy to pick up some necessities. Thus began my friendship with Casey Walker. I think I was the only male friend Casey had since she was 18. Every other man she met wanted to sleep with her, and that was the sole reason for their communication. It wasn't that I didn't find her attractive. She was the most alluring and sultry woman I've ever met. But I was married and took my vows seriously. I've had other attractive women as friends before, so I didn't see Casey as just an object of desire. With her around, the nights and weekends when Alex was out of town were no longer lonely. Casey and I always found something to do, even after she fully recovered about a month later and looked as stunning as before. Since Casey's regular work schedule included mornings and afternoons on weekdays, with occasional overnights or out-of-town stays, we spent almost every evening together when Alex wasn't around. I encouraged Casey to attend parties and meetings sponsored by the condominium association, making sure she had a good time. However, I realized that I couldn't bring her along to outings with my male friends. They were too distracted by her beauty to be good company. So, Casey and I often went out alone, and she seemed to enjoy it. Even after Casey resumed her work as an escort, she insisted on helping me with paperwork. I soon discovered that she had a greater intellectual curiosity and intelligence than most people gave her credit for, so I encouraged her and started teaching her about my business. When I tried to pay her for her help, she always put forward some conditions, like a swim in the pool or doubling our study time in the office for double payment or nothing. More often than not, I ended up paying nothing, which seemed to make her happier than if I had paid double. I found Casey to be one of the most honest and kind people I have ever met. She spent about 10 hours trying to find the owner of a small handbag with nearly 100 in cash that had been lost at the pool, eventually succeeding. She told me about a client who developed health problems during their session, and she took him to the hospital, refunding his money despite his protests. She cried when she couldn't save a little bird that crashed into the Building S lobby window and returned a lost puppy to its owner, refusing a reward. She tipped the paper boy extra, never gossiped, and never spoke ill of anyone, even when guys hit on her. About 8 or 9 months after Casey and I became close friends, she surprised me by showing me an application for admission to the local community college. "I want to get an Associate S degree in Business Administration," she announced with a wide grin. "Can you help me with homework sometimes?" "Of course I can," I said, genuinely proud of her. She was absolutely delighted by my response, running up to me and hugging me tightly. Every time she hugged me, I had to make sure there was some distance between us, but this time she hugged me so long and tightly that she must have sensed my arousal. We both chose to ignore it. I was pleasantly surprised that Alex didn't become jealous as she learned more about my friendship with Casey. I think this was due to several factors. First, Casey and I never showed our affection in public, and in private we never did more than hug or share a chaste kiss on the cheek. Second, we had a solid cover story for Casey's profession. Third, Casey began helping Alex with her paperwork, which Alex appreciated. Fourth, I convinced a longtime gay friend of mine, who wasn't T, openly gay but ID known since high school, to pose as Casey's boyfriend at condo association events and occasionally go on double dates with Alex and me. Of course, life isn't always smooth sailing. On a Sunday morning, Alex received a phone call that required her to rush out of town on business, leaving much more distracted than usual. As she hurried out, she pulled out a jumbled pile of documents from her briefcase, placed them on the coffee table, and asked if Casey could sort them into folders. I assured her, certainly. I was disappointed with Alex's quick departure because we had planned to go apple picking that day, an annual event I always looked forward to. Shortly after Alex left, I sent Casey a text Alex left on business. "Want to go apple picking this afternoon?" She quickly replied, "Let's go at 11:00 or any time after 2:00, okay?" A happy emoji appeared on the screen. We had a great time picking apples and eating apple cider donuts despite several college guys trying to peek down Casey's shorts while she stood on the steps and stared at her in the donut shop. That evening we had dinner together at my condo and planned to watch a DVD afterward. But before I put the disc in the player, Casey asked, "What are these?" She reached for the pile of papers Alex had left in disarray on the coffee table. "Oh, those are the papers Alex dropped off in a hurry. She asked if you could sort them before she gets back on Wednesday evening," I replied nonchalantly. "Of course," she said, gathering the papers together. As she did, something slipped out of the stack and fell onto the floor. I was busy loading a DVD and didn't notice something had fallen until I turned and saw Casey's face. She was holding what looked like a photograph, her expression completely shocked. "What is this, Casey?" I asked. Nothing," she stammered, quickly placing the photo back in the stack of papers. Casey would never make a good poker player. Her face clearly showed that this was far from nothing. I approached her and gently took her hand. "No, really, let me see what you were looking at. What is the big secret?" As I freed her from the papers, she sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. About halfway down the stack, I found 3 6x9 photographs, each depicting Alex, unclothed and with different men, clearly engaged in intimate activities. I sank onto the living room carpet, 2 photographs and the rest of the papers spilling onto the floor as I sat stunned, holding the 3rd photograph. "I'm really, really sorry," Casey said, placing a hand on my face. I looked at her, stunned and unable to process what I was seeing. "Maybe these are old photos from before you got married," she suggested, grasping at straws. "She only got that butterfly tattoo on her left shoulder 2 years ago," I muttered. After a long pause, during which Casey asked if there was anything she could do, I finally said, "Casey, I need some time alone to process this. Even though you are my best friend, I don't want to talk to anyone right now, please." I felt tears in my eyes, and I'm sure Casey noticed when she hugged me before leaving. After half an hour of crying, I steeled myself and decided to take action instead of wallowing in self-pity. I frantically searched the house, rifling through all of Alex's dresser drawers, boxes on closet shelves, and her office files. One of her desk drawers was locked, but I forced it open, finding at least a dozen incriminating pieces of evidence. The question wasn't whether Alex had cheated on me, but for how long and with how many different people. I went through stages of anger, humiliation, irritation, and shock, the constant refrain in my mind being, how could I have been so naive? I didn't sleep that night. On Monday, I looked and felt like hell. I couldn't focus on work and had even less luck deciding what to do about Alex. Around 2:00 p.m., there was a knock on the door. It was Casey, holding a large pitcher of margaritas, which surprised me since I'd never seen her drink more than one at a time, and I'd never had more than one myself. "Listen, stud," she said, placing the pitcher on the coffee table. "I canceled my meeting for today. I called your production assistants and told them you wouldn't be working this afternoon. We're going to get drunk, and tomorrow you can decide what to do about your little wife." I started to protest, but it was no use. Casey was determined. I gathered all of Alex's papers that had fallen on the floor, except for the 3 photographs, and threw them towards the fireplace. I took the glass Casey handed me and sipped from it. God, it burned. Casey was focused on making me not only drunk, but also happy. After an hour of hilarious stories and 6 drinks, maybe more, I lost count. She succeeded. I passed out before it even got dark, lying on the floor next to the sofa while Casey lay on the sofa with one arm hanging down, touching me. After a while, I began to hear ringing in my ears. It took a few repetitions before I realized it was the landline phone. I stumbled towards it and saw Alex's cell number on the caller ID. I unplugged the phone, returned to the sofa, moved Casey over, and fell asleep next to her. We woke up together in the middle of the night, probably around 4 a.m. Casey's first comment, made with a mischievous smile, was mind-blowing. "You're the first guy I've slept with who didn't sleep with me," she joked. I started laughing. "When you see yourself in the mirror, you'll understand why, Broomhilda," I muttered. "You're not a prize yourself," she shot back, laughing. "I can tell if I'm talking to your face or your back. You a hole." We both got up, went to the bathroom, drank some water, and then fell asleep next to each other, fully clothed, on the covers in the master bedroom. I woke up around 8:00 to the smell of bacon and eggs. I stumbled downstairs to the kitchen where Casey was cooking. "Breakfast for 2, she said in a sing-song voice. "I thought I'd have to light a stick of dynamite to wake you up," she laughed. I felt awful and cringed when I saw myself in the mirror. "This is definitely the worst I've ever looked," I said aloud. Then I looked at Casey. She had clearly showered, changed clothes, and put on light makeup. She looked amazing, too good, especially considering the hangover from the day before. "I hang out with you for your charm, not your looks," she grumbled while turning an egg. "Now sit down and try to hide your face behind the cereal box." "So I can have breakfast in peace," Casey joked, tossing the bagel quarter from her plate onto mine. I didn't realize how hungry I was until I started eating. The food was delicious, and I quickly finished everything on my plate. "I'm glad to see a man appreciates my cooking," Casey laughed as I polished off a 3rd egg, 200 grams of bacon, and the 4th piece of toast. "Are you going to finish this bagel?" I asked, eyeing the buttered bagel quarter. She laughed and handed it over, and I devoured it in seconds. After breakfast, Casey cleaned up and loaded the dishwasher. She then took my head in her hands, looking me directly in the eyes. "I am busy today and have an overnight stay, but I'll be here tomorrow afternoon. Let me know if there's anything I can do. But before you make any big decisions, you need to talk to Alex in person. Do you understand?" Okay, I muttered, nodding repeatedly. Casey kissed me chastely on the lips for the first time. Oh, you are gross, she giggled. Shave, shower, and brush your teeth before you do anything else. I laughed and nodded, watching her leave. By the end of Tuesday, I had sobered up, cleaned the apartment, and saved all the evidence digitally onto a flash drive. I didn't speak to anyone except my software assistant and my production foreman. My cell phone was filled with messages from Alex, her parents, and even mine. I didn't want to talk to anyone, and it was just as well that my inbox was full and my landline disconnected. I had mostly decided what to do, but was still figuring out the details when Alex suddenly burst into the apartment on Wednesday morning, 12 hours earlier than expected. I turned away as soon as I saw her. "Blake, I was so worried," she said, her voice filled with genuine concern. "You weren't answering your calls and I thought something had happened. What could possibly be wrong, my faithful wife?" I retorted with biting sarcasm. She turned pale, her hand flying to her mouth as her eyes landed on the neatly stacked papers she had left on the coffee table. She began to tremble. "Let me show you my little collection of surprises," I said, leading her to the kitchen table where the evidence was laid out. "Maybe you can explain this," I demanded. After several deep, choking sobs, she began to stammer. "Blake, I love you. It didn't mean anything. I got caught up in trying to be the top in sales. I made some bad choices, but I'll stop, I promise. We can work through this. You are the only one for me. I'll get pregnant and we can start a family, etc., etc., etc." Finally, I lost it. I stormed into the master bedroom, grabbing all her clothes from the closet and dresser drawers, throwing them into the guest room without caring where they landed. Alex stood in the hallway, sobbing, and then collapsed to her knees. When I was done, I went into the kitchen, retrieved the lock I had bought the day before, and installed it on the master bedroom door while she continued to sob and plead. Once the bedroom and my office were secured, I left. I went to my production site, had lunch, and then went to the cinema. I returned to the apartment around 11:00 p.m. Alex was sitting on the sofa, looking terrible, with her mother and sister beside her. "Why are you here, Candace?" I asked irritably, addressing my mother-in-law. I had always tried to be cordial with her, but now I felt no need to hide my disdain. "No more, Blake," she said, clearly shocked by my tone. "Cher and I are here to support Jamie and help you both get through this." "A mistake?" I laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call it? Did you show your mom the photos, Alex?" I asked sarcastically. She looked down, avoiding my gaze. "Why don't you do something helpful, Candace? Like arranging for Alex to be with the 34 other men she slept with, then we can talk." I retreated to my bedroom and locked the door, surprising myself by sleeping well that night. The next morning, Alex was gone. A simple note was left. "I've gone to stay with Mom and Dad until you calm down and we can talk. Dawn to throw away our future, Blake. We can get through this. Love, Alex." On Monday morning at her parents' house, Alex was served divorce papers. There were two sets: the first proposed divorce by mutual consent, dividing property 50-50 due to irreconcilable differences. The second sought a divorce on the grounds of infidelity, accompanied by irrefutable evidence. My note read, "I haven't filed any of these yet. The choice is yours. I need to hear from you by 9:00 a.m. tomorrow. If I don't hear from you by then, I'll submit the second set of papers. Have a nice life." On Monday evening around 6:00, there was a knock on my apartment door. It was Casey with a bright smile. "Let's go eat pizza, my treat," she said cheerfully. "I don't eat," I began, but she cut me off immediately. "You don't have a single excuse not to go. Let's go." "Okay," I said, realizing I needed a break. "I need my wallet." "No, you don't, T. I am treating you. You just need the keys," she smiled, taking my hand and pulling me out of the apartment, grabbing the keys from the table near the door and handing them to me. We ate at our favorite pizzeria, known for its all-organic ingredients. Casey tried her best to keep the mood light, which helped, although I was still more subdued than usual. When we finished eating and were in a secluded part of the restaurant, she took my hand and asked, "Have you decided what you're going to do?" "Yes, I sent her 2 sets of divorce papers today," I said. "One amicable, the other contentious. I told her it was her choice, and I'll serve one of them tomorrow morning. No chance of reconciliation? She asked softly. I've thought long and hard about this. I just can't forgive or forget. Loyalty is extremely important to me, and it was clear she doesn't value that. I don't even intend to speak with her anymore, I said, feeling a heavy weight lift off my shoulders. Casey looked into my eyes, then down at our hands before speaking again. When your divorce is final, I want to be with you first. What? I asked. Sure, I had misheard her. You are my best friend, plus I am in love with you. As soon as we go on our first date, I'll quit my current job. I'm confident I can find another job, and I don't care if it doesn't pay much. I have enough savings to last until I win you over, and I will if you give me a chance. I was stunned. I had no idea Casey felt this way about me. My silence was due to shock, not hesitation. I couldn't believe she was actually in love with me. The thought of being with this incredible woman who was already my best friend made my entire body tremble with excitement. I know you probably don't want an ex-call girl as your girlfriend, she started to say, but I interrupted her. Shut up, I said, standing up and kissing her hard on the lips. After a moment, she responded, standing up and kissing me back passionately across the table. When we finally parted, I sat back down. If you are crazy enough to be in love with me, here is my plan. We keep our relationship as it is until 2 weeks before my divorce is final. Then you quit your job, I sell my condo, and you break your lease. On the day the divorce is final, we go to a resort for a week, and if you still want to be with me after that, we move to another part of the country, rent an apartment together, and if you are still crazy enough to want me, we get married. Casey put her hands over her mouth and began to cry. We walked back to our apartments holding hands, both of us feeling more alive than ever. As we kissed passionately at her door, I didn't care that my body was reacting to her presence. Before we each went into our apartments, we looked at each other with big smiles until the doors closed. That night, I knew I wanted our plan to work more than anything else I had ever wanted in my life. However, I expected complications, and the first one came when Alex's father, James, called at 7:50 a.m. Hearing his voice made me tense. Hello, Blake, this is James Snowden. I was hoping I could get Jamie an hour off your 9:00 deadline so we could meet. The meeting won't change anything, James. Blake, you have nothing to lose. If after an hour-long meeting with me you still want a divorce, I guarantee Jamie will choose the irreconcilable differences option, and things will move forward quickly. Please, you owe me this. I didn't owe him a damn thing, but considering how I wanted my relationship with Casey to develop, speed was crucial. Okay, when will we meet? I can be there in half an hour, he said. See you then, I replied, hanging up. The meeting with James was pointless except to confirm that he had no idea who I really was. He tried to convince me of the economic benefits of staying married to Jamie and how wealthy I would become. He did everything he could to persuade me to remain married, even offering $2 million in cash and promising Jamie would sign a post-nuptial agreement, guaranteeing me another $2 million if she ever cheated again. Sorry, James, you've done everything you can for your little girl, but there's no deal, I said firmly. I'm still trying to understand why she wants to stay married. I'd assume she'd be happy if I wasn't in her way. Cheating wasn't her style, Blake. She just lost focus on what was important. I am sorry, but I want to stay, I replied. Don T. forget to tell her to deliver the signed papers to my lawyer this morning. James looked sad as he left, perhaps more for his daughter than for me. Finally, the day came when the divorce was final, both Casey and I. Casey and I moved out of our apartments after 10 days. I sold my apartment and all the furniture except the computer equipment Jamie didn't need, and Casey's 30-day lease was up, so she sold her furniture too. I completed the sale of my business hardware to my employees. Jamie didn't appear in court, only her lawyer showed up for the final hearing. I attended because I wanted to get a copy of the resolution immediately. After the trial, I knocked on the door of apartment 5B, my luggage packed for the trip to the resort. I expected Casey to be ready to go, but she had a different plan. She was unclothed except for her high heels and an ankle bracelet. We have time to get to know each other better before we go to the resort. Besides, I don't think you can handle a 2-hour drive, she giggled, pointing at my obvious excitement. Casey pulled me into her apartment by my tie. Since her bed had already been moved out, the couch cushions were laid on the living room floor. As we kissed passionately, she unbuttoned my clothes, removed my shirt, pulled down my boxers, and focused on my arousal. Meanwhile, I enjoyed caressing her perfectly shaped body. Then I took off my shoes, pants, and boxers, leaving my socks on, and began to explore her intimately. The experience was even better than I had imagined. She climaxed, and I continued to caress her. She whispered, "Now make love to me." As I did, she kissed me, wrapping her legs around me. Then something incredible happened. She began contracting her pelvic muscles powerfully, and I quickly reached the climax. A few seconds later, her muscles tightened even more, and we both screamed in ecstasy. I don't know if I lost consciousness, but I was definitely delirious. Casey held me tightly until I came to my senses and rolled onto my side, feeling a pleasant tingle as I withdrew. I looked into her face, and she smiled widely. "Those were the first 2 real climaxes I've had since I can remember," she chirped. "Do you know why?" "Because I am such a wonderful lover," I joked. She giggled and then became serious. "I reached fantastic climaxes because we made love, not just sex. I really love you, Blake. And I love you very much too, Casey. Even before you just rocked my world. That was so much better than anything I'd ever experienced. It felt like something else entirely." She kissed me deeply. After resting a little, we enjoyed another round of intimate connection, this time more tender and loving. Finally, we got dressed, packed our suitcases into the car, and drove off. Casey snuggled up to me for the first hour of the drive, then pulled away. "Blake, I have 4 things to tell you. I need to do this now before we go any further. Ready?" "Ready," I smiled. "First, my name isn't T. Casey Walker. It S. Barbara Godin, but I go by Babs. I have a full set of fake IDs, good enough to sign a lease and buy a car. If things work out between us, I intend to completely leave my old identity behind and cut off all ties to my past as an escort." "Wow, you could work for the CIA," I whistled. "You're good at hiding your identity. Should I call you Babs now?" "Dante called me Babs until you were ready to put a ring on it," she chuckled. "Okay, Casey, what is the next revelation?" "I stopped working as an escort the day I told you I loved you. I've also accelerated through a community college program and finished my freshman year, with 3 credits already completed for my sophomore year." "That is fantastic," I replied sincerely. "You are full of surprises." "I am not finished yet," she grinned. "Thirdly, I came up with a new concept for an online business. I'll tell you more about it after our trip, and if you like it, we can work on it together 50-50. I can't wait to hear about it," I smiled. "Lastly, and this is the only thing that makes me nervous," she sighed, blushing slightly. "If you have questions about my work as an escort, you should ask them this week. I'll answer them honestly, but after this week I don't want to think about it anymore. Any mention of it will make me very angry. So if you have questions, ask them now." It was obvious the topic made her uneasy. I had already decided long ago that her past profession didn't matter to me, though I was relieved she had stopped working as an escort over 2 months ago. I thought carefully before responding. After a long pause, I said, "I really only have one question, and I'll leave it at that." She looked at me expectantly. "You said you charged $700 an hour, right?" "Yes," she answered hesitantly. "Now that I've made love to you, I wonder why you charged so little." "You should have charged 100 times more," I joked. She smiled widely, kissed my cheek, and then rested her head on my shoulder. That was the last time we talked about her past. Our stay at the resort was phenomenal, like a perfect honeymoon, even though we weren't technically married. We enjoyed snorkeling, swimming, jet skiing, hiking, playing beach volleyball, archery, and drinking together. We danced, hugged, and kissed, and the intimacy was otherworldly. The only downside was that after 7 days my body was sore, but it was a satisfying kind of pain because I was the happiest I had ever been. After the first day at the resort, when we fell asleep in each other's arms after making love, I decided I would propose to her, which I did on the 5th day. She said yes. We could have gotten married the day after we left the resort, But since Babs had never been married and had a few relatives she cared about, we waited 3 months and had a small but perfectly proper wedding ceremony and reception in our new city. Within 9 months of moving, Babs earned an Associate S degree in Business Administration. We worked together on my software business, and 3 months later we launched her new business, which used a patented system she developed to maximize online promotions using hybrid recognition of search queries. Now, 3 years after launching, Weavy decided to sell her business for a 7-figure sum because she wants to focus on something else. Babs, my best friend and love of my life, is pregnant with twins.